People think I'm retired. My daughter calls me disconnected. Her husband built his restaurant empire using my recipes, my techniques, my 20 years of sweat, and she handed it all to him with a smile. At the grand opening of his flagship location, the sommelier poured me a glass and said, "Chef, this sauce, it tastes exactly like yours." He wasn't wrong, it was mine. He just didn't know how right he was. My name is Martin Calloway. I'm 53 years old, and for the last 4 years, everyone in my family has treated me like a man who gave up. They're wrong. I gave up being visible. I never gave up paying attention. 20 years ago, I built a catering empire in Chicago called Calloway & Co. Started with a food truck parked outside office buildings in the Loop, serving braised short ribs and handmade pasta to people who'd never had anything better than a soggy sandwich for lunch. I developed every recipe myself. The sauces, the marinades, the pastry techniques, all mine. I kept notebooks, hundreds of them, filled with formulas I'd spent years perfecting. Ratios, temperatures, timing sequences, fermentation processes, things you can't Google. Things that took me 15 years of 16-hour days to figure out. I scaled that business to 14 locations across Illinois and Indiana. Landed contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies for corporate dining. Revenue hit $42 million the year I sold it. I walked away clean. No interviews, no cookbook deals, just a wire transfer and a quiet life in a house on Lake Michigan that I thought would make my wife happy. Diana, my wife of 24 years, liked the house. Hated the silence. She'd spent 2 decades being married to the guy everyone wanted at their table, the chef who got standing ovations at charity galas, who shook hands with mayors and food critics. When I stopped performing, she got restless. Then came Victor Ashford, my son-in-law. My oldest daughter Rachel married him 6 years ago. He was a line cook at a mid-range steakhouse when they met. Ambitious, charming, the kind of guy who makes eye contact a little too long and laughs a little too loud. Diana adored him, said he reminded her of me when I was young and hungry. That should have been the first warning. 3 years ago, Victor opened a restaurant in downtown Chicago called Ember. Modern American cuisine with, and I'm quoting from his press materials, innovative culinary techniques that redefine comfort food. The restaurant was in a building on Michigan Avenue. Beautiful space, open kitchen concept, reclaimed wood and copper fixtures. The kind of place food bloggers fight over. What Victor didn't know, what Rachel didn't know, what Diana certainly never mentioned, was that I owned that building. Not directly. Through a holding company called Hearthstone Properties, registered in Wyoming, managed by a firm in Milwaukee. The lease was handled by people who never connected Martin Calloway, retired caterer, with the entity funding their dream restaurant location. But here's the part that kept me awake at night. Every signature dish at Ember, every technique that food critics raved about, every so-called innovation that had investors lining up, was mine. Diana had given Victor access to my recipe notebooks. All of them. The ones I kept in the study, the ones in the basement storage, even the encrypted files on my personal hard drive. She knew every password because I trusted her with everything. I found the evidence 11 months ago. Diana's old laptop, the one she said she'd recycled, was sitting in a box in the garage. I opened it on a whim. There was an email thread from 3.5 years ago. Diana to Victor. Subject line: Martin's Recipe Archive. Thought this might help you get started. Attached were scanned pages of my notebooks. Hundreds of pages. Sauce formulations, fermentation schedules, plating techniques, everything I'd spent 2 decades developing. Victor's response: This changes everything. When can we talk? They hadn't copied my recipes word for word. They were smarter than that. Victor had adapted them, tweaked seasoning profiles, changed presentation styles, renamed dishes. But the foundation, the core techniques, the architecture of every flavor profile, was mine. A trained palate could taste it. I could taste it the first time Rachel brought home leftovers from Ember's soft opening, and I said nothing. I just chewed and swallowed and smiled and felt something cold settle in my chest. Tonight was Ember's grand opening of their 3rd location. Rachel insisted I come. Dad, Victor's worked so hard. It would mean a lot to him if you were there. Which really meant she needed her father present so the family photos looked complete. I went. Stood near the bar with a glass of bourbon, watching my son-in-law work the room like a politician. Shaking hands, accepting compliments, posing for photos in his chef's whites with his name embroidered above the pocket. My daughter on his arm, glowing. Diana was across the room, laughing with Victor's investors, touching their arms, leaning in close. She'd always been good at that, making powerful people feel special. She used to do it for my business. Now she did it for his. That's when it happened. Victor brought out the tasting menu for the VIP table. 7 courses, each one a masterpiece. The sommelier, an older gentleman named Paul who'd actually worked at one of my Calloway & Co. locations 15 years ago, was pouring wine pairings. He set a glass in front of me and paused. "Chef Calloway?" he said, recognition dawning. "I didn't know you'd be here." I nodded. "Just a guest tonight, Paul." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Sir, I have to ask. That braised lamb sauce, the one they're calling Victor's signature. I've tasted it before. Years ago, at your Gold Coast location." He searched my face. "It's yours, isn't it?" I held his gaze for a long moment, then took a sip of bourbon. "Enjoy the evening, Paul." But Victor had heard. He materialized beside us, that practiced smile tightening at the edges. "Everything okay over here?" Paul straightened. "Just catching up with an old colleague, Chef Ashford." Victor's eyes flicked between us. Then he looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Uncertainty. "Martin, you're enjoying the food?" "Every bite tastes familiar," I said. The color shifted in his face. Not quite pale, but something behind his eyes recalculated. He excused himself quickly, pulling his phone from his pocket, walking toward the kitchen. Rachel appeared at my elbow. "What did you say to him?" "Complimented the food." He looked upset. "Maybe he's nervous." Big night. She studied me the way Diana used to, searching for the thing I wasn't saying. Then the music swelled, someone clinked a glass for a toast, and the evening carried on. But I'd planted the seed. And seeds, in my experience, always grow. The drive home was quiet. Diana scrolled through Instagram photos from the event. I watched the Chicago skyline reflect off the lake. "Victor seemed tense after talking to you," she said without looking up. "Opening night jitters." "Martin." Her voice sharpened. "What did you say to him?" "I told him the food was familiar." She put down her phone. "What does that mean?" "It means what it means." We pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. Our son Nathan was in Boston finishing his residency. Our younger daughter Chloe was studying abroad in London. Just us in 4,000 square feet of lake house that echoed when you walked through it. Diana went upstairs without a word. I poured myself a scotch, sat in my study, and opened my laptop. 2 emails were already waiting, both from attorneys I didn't recognize. Victor worked fast when he was scared. The first was a polite inquiry about Hearthstone Properties and its ownership structure. The second requested documentation regarding building lease terms and tenant rights. I smiled. They were poking around, trying to figure out if I was who Paul's reaction suggested I was. Trying to find a way to separate Martin Calloway, the retired chef from Hearthstone Properties, the landlord, from the man whose recipes built their empire. They wouldn't find that separation. Because it didn't exist. I opened a separate folder on my desktop. Inside were files I'd been assembling for 11 months. Scanned notebooks with dated entries. Timestamped digital files predating Ember's founding by 15 years. Diana's email chain. Culinary analysis reports from 2 independent food scientists I'd hired, each confirming that Ember's core recipes were derivative works based on documented Calloway & Co. formulations. I had comparison charts showing technique by technique overlap. I had testimony from 3 former employees who'd recognized my methods the first time they ate at Ember. I closed the laptop. Outside, November wind pushed waves against the shoreline. Somewhere across the city, Victor was probably making calls, trying to contain a problem he didn't fully understand yet. He couldn't contain it. The recipes he built his reputation on weren't his. They were mine, and I was done watching someone else take credit. Diana found me in the kitchen at 6 in the morning. I hadn't slept. She was already dressed, phone buzzing in her hand. "Victor wants to meet. Today?" "He says it's urgent and it involves you." I poured coffee. Took my time with the cream. "About what?" He wouldn't say. "Just that it's serious." She searched my face. "Martin, what's happening?" When you gave Victor my recipe notebooks 3.5 years ago, did you think I'd never find out? She froze. The coffee cup in her hand tilted, nearly spilling. I don't know what you're talking about. March 2022. Your email to Victor. Subject line, thought this might help you get started. You scanned 300 pages of my personal notebooks and sent them to him. I was trying to help him. He was struggling with the menu development and Rachel was worried and I thought, you thought you'd hand him 20 years of my work and call it family support? My voice stayed level. Calm. That seemed to scare her more than shouting would have. Did he pay you? Or was it just about being needed again? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Diana? Her phone buzzed again. Victor's name on the screen. She didn't answer. Ember's entire menu is built on my techniques, I continued. Every signature dish, every so-called innovation. They didn't copy recipes directly. They were smart enough to adapt them. But the bones are mine. The foundation is mine. And I have 11 months of documentation proving it. You're being paranoid. I have your emails. I have the scanned notebooks with your fingerprints on the glass. I have independent culinary analysis confirming technique by technique derivation. I have former employees willing to testify. I pulled out my phone, showed her the screen. Her own words stared back at her. She went pale. Victor said it was just inspiration. Reference material. Reference material you stole from my study while I was sleeping. You weren't using them. You retired, Martin. You walked away from everything. Those notebooks were just sitting in boxes collecting dust. They were mine. The fact that I stopped cooking commercially doesn't mean I gave up ownership of 20 years of work. Her phone rang again. This time she answered, walking into the hallway. I heard her voice rise, defensive, then panicked. When she came back, her hands were shaking. Someone filed a complaint with the Illinois Restaurant Association. An anonymous tip about intellectual property misuse. Victor thinks it's you. It is. Martin, you'll destroy him. He destroyed himself when he built 3 restaurants on stolen recipes. Your daughter works there. Rachel is his partner. If Ember goes under, she loses everything. That stopped me. Rachel, 31 years old. She'd quit her marketing job to help Victor build Ember. She managed front-of-house operations, handled PR, built their social media presence from nothing. She'd been so proud of what they'd created together. Rachel's talented, I said. She'll land on her feet. Not if her father destroys the business she built with her husband. The business she built on my stolen work. Diana moved closer. Please, Martin, think about what this does to our family. I looked at her. The woman I'd loved for 24 years. The woman who'd stood beside me in that cramped food truck kitchen, who'd hand-delivered catering orders in her own car when we couldn't afford a delivery driver. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being my partner and started being someone who made decisions about my life's work without asking me. I'm thinking about family, I said. I'm thinking about what you did to ours. Rachel called at noon. Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying. Dad, we need to talk about why my husband just got a call from a culinary IP attorney who mentioned your name 7 times. You read the filing. Victor read it to me, word by word, while our sous chef stood there listening. She paused. Please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. What do you think I'm doing? Destroying my marriage because Mom made a mistake. This isn't about your mother. It's about intellectual property theft. It's about recipes, Dad. Recipes. Recipes that took me 20 years to develop. Techniques that are worth millions. Your husband built a business valued at $60 million on work your mother stole from my study and emailed to him without my knowledge or consent. Silence. Then, Mom did what? I explained everything. The emails, the scanned notebooks, the analysis reports. Rachel listened without interrupting. When she'd been little, she used to sit on the kitchen counter and watch me cook for hours without speaking. She had that same quiet now. Processing. How long have you known? She finally asked. 11 months. And you didn't tell me? Would you have believed me? I don't know. Her voice cracked. Victor's not a thief. He works 18-hour days. He's at the restaurant before dawn and doesn't come home until midnight. He earned this. He earned it using my foundation. Dad. Chefs build on each other's work all the time. That's how cuisine evolves. Not when they copy proprietary techniques without permission and claim them as original innovations. What do you want me to do? Nothing. This isn't your fight. It is when my marriage depends on it. Her voice hardened. I gave up my career to help build Ember. I've worked 70-hour weeks for 3 years. I put $100,000 of my savings into the business. And now you're going to destroy it because your ego can't handle that someone else succeeded with your old recipes? That hit harder than I expected. This isn't about ego, isn't it? You sold your company. You retired. You disappeared into that lake house and stopped talking to anyone. Mom found purpose again. I found a life with Victor. And you can't stand that we moved on without you. Rachel, I have to go. Victor's calling an emergency meeting with our investors. The line went dead. My daughter thought I was the villain. She might not have been entirely wrong about the ego part, but she was dead wrong about the rest. Nathan called 3 days later. My son, 28, finishing his surgical residency at Mass General. The only one of my 3 children who'd inherited my precision and Diana's calm under pressure. Dad, I need to understand what's happening. Rachel called you. Rachel, Mom, and about 4 of Mom's friends who think you've snapped. He paused. Have you? Not yet. Then explain to me why you're trying to destroy your daughter's livelihood. I told him everything. Nathan listened the way he listened to patient histories, carefully, asking the right questions at the right time. Okay, he said when I finished. So Mom massively betrayed your trust. And Victor knowingly benefited from stolen intellectual property. But Dad, there's something you should know before you go further. What? Chloe took out loans. What loans? Student loans. But not for tuition. She borrowed $80,000 against her future earnings and invested it in Ember's expansion fund last year. Mom told her it was a sure thing. My chest tightened. Dad, she's 21. She doesn't even graduate for another year. And she's already $80,000 in debt because Mom convinced her Victor's restaurants were a gold mine. Diana did what? Chloe didn't want to tell you because she knew you'd be angry about the debt. But if Ember collapses, she doesn't just lose her investment. She owes $80,000 with interest and no degree yet to help her pay it back. I closed my eyes. Rachel's savings. Chloe's loans. Nathan was the only one Diana hadn't pulled into Victor's orbit, and that was only because he was 2,000 miles away doing something she couldn't monetize. There's more. Nathan continued. I've been looking at Ember's public filings. Their latest investor deck shows projected revenue of $80 million over 5 years. They're raising a new round at a $120 million valuation. Based on my recipes. Based on your recipes. And they're courting institutional investors now. Pension funds. Family offices. If you blow this up, you're not just hurting Victor, you're wiping out real people's retirement savings. People who invested in a fraud. People who didn't know it was a fraud. Including your youngest daughter who's now underwater on loans she took out because her mother told her to. Silence stretched between us. What would you have me do? I asked. What I do with a patient who needs surgery but has complications. You don't abandon the operation. You adjust the approach. Find a way to fix the problem without killing the patient. This isn't medicine, Nathan. No, it's family. And right now you're holding the scalpel. He let that sit. Then, we're all coming home, Dad. This weekend. All 3 of us. Chloe's flying back from London. She's cutting short her semester. She's terrified she's going to graduate with $80,000 in debt and nothing to show for it. His voice softened. We're going to sit down and figure this out together. Please be there when we do. He hung up. My youngest daughter, 21 years old, had borrowed $80,000 on the advice of her own mother, who funneled it into a business built on her father's stolen work. The symmetry of it was almost elegant in its cruelty. They arrived Friday evening. Rachel from her apartment downtown. Nathan on a red-eye from Boston, Chloe from Heathrow, looking exhausted and scared in a way I'd never seen on her face before. I heard them gather in the living room while I sat in my study. Their voices weren't reunion voices. They were war council voices. Chloe found me first. My youngest. 21 with Diana's freckles and my stubborn jaw. She didn't knock. Dad, Chloe. I stood to hug her. She let me, but briefly, then stepped back. I need to tell you something and I need you to not yell. I know about the loans. Her face crumbled. Mom said it was safe. She said Ember was going to be huge. She said I'd double my money before graduation. I know. $80,000, Dad. I don't sleep anymore. I lie awake calculating interest payments. Her voice broke. And now Nathan says you're trying to shut it all down? I'm trying to reclaim what's mine. What's yours is going to cost me the next 10 years of my life paying off debt I can't afford. She wiped her eyes. Do you know what it's like being 21 and already feeling like your future is mortgaged? The door opened. Rachel and Nathan walked in. United front. Family meeting, Rachel said. Not asking. We moved to the living room. Diana was already there, standing by the lake-facing windows, arms crossed. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in a week. Nathan set up his laptop on the coffee table. I've spent the last 4 days analyzing Ember's financials, investor documents, and operational structure. Here's what I found. He pulled up spreadsheets. Ember is valued at $120 million on paper. But here's the thing. 85% of that valuation is based on what critics and investors call Victor's proprietary culinary methodology. Dad's culinary methodology. He clicked to the next screen. If Dad pulls the IP claim, the valuation drops to maybe $15 million. Every investor, every employee, every vendor owed money. They all take catastrophic losses. That's not my problem, I said. It becomes your problem, Rachel cut in, when those investors come after you. I've been talking to our attorneys. If you destroy Ember through an IP claim, there's precedent for investors to sue for tortious interference. I own the intellectual property, and you waited 11 months to enforce it, during which time Ember raised $30 million from investors who had no idea the recipes were disputed. Rachel's voice was calm, professional. She'd been practicing this. A good lawyer could argue you knowingly allowed the fraud to continue. You could be on the hook for damages. I looked at her. My daughter, 31 years old, using legal strategy against her own father to protect her husband. Are you seriously threatening to help investors sue me? I'm trying to save everyone. She met my eyes. Including you. Chloe spoke up. I'm $80,000 in debt. Rachel put in $100,000. Nathan's the only one Mom didn't drag into this. Do you know what that feels like? Knowing your own mother weaponized your trust? That shifted something in the room. For the first time, the anger wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at Diana. Diana's voice came out barely above a whisper. I made a mistake. A mistake? Chloe turned on her. You told me to invest money I didn't have. You told Rachel to quit her job. You gave Dad's life work to Victor and let him build an empire on it. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's a pattern. The room went silent. I hadn't expected that. Chloe, my youngest, the quiet one, had just said what I'd been thinking for months. Nathan spoke carefully. Mom, we need to understand something. Why did you give Victor those notebooks? The real reason. Diana's composure cracked. Because he listened to me. Because when Martin retired, I stopped existing. I wasn't the chef's wife anymore. I wasn't anyone. Victor asked me about Martin's work, said he wanted to learn, and for the first time in years, someone acted like what I knew mattered. So you traded Dad's legacy for attention, Rachel said flatly. I didn't think of it that way. How did you think of it? Diana didn't answer. I stood. Here's what's going to happen. I'm meeting with Victor and his attorneys on Monday. I'm going to make him an offer. What kind of offer? Nathan asked. The kind he can't refuse. Full transfer of the Ember brand and operations to me. Victor steps down as head chef. Diana resigns from any advisory role. In exchange, the restaurants stay open, employees keep their jobs, and investors don't lose their money. And Victor? Rachel's voice was tight. Victor admits publicly that Ember's core methodology was developed by me. He gets nothing. No equity, no consulting role, no golden parachute. That will humiliate him. He humiliated himself when he built a career on stolen work. Rachel's eyes filled. He's my husband, Dad. And you're my daughter. Which is why I'm not destroying the company. I'm taking it back. Chloe raised her hand slightly, like she was in class. What about my loans? Diana's equity in Ember gets transferred to you. All of it. It'll more than cover your debt. Diana's head snapped up. What? You put our daughter $80,000 in debt using my stolen recipes as bait. Consider it restitution. The meeting with Victor happened Monday morning at Hearthstone Properties office. My building. My conference room. My terms. Victor arrived looking like he hadn't eaten in days, which was ironic for a chef. His attorney, a sharp-jawed man named Russell Drake, sat beside him with a stack of documents. Diana came uninvited. Rachel came as Victor's support. I didn't object to either. Let's skip the pleasantries, I said. You know what I have. You know what it proves. Here's my offer. I laid it out. Full ownership transfer. Victor's resignation as head chef. Public statement acknowledging the IP origin. Diana's equity to Chloe. Ember continues operating under my oversight. Russell started to counter. Victor raised his hand. What if I cooperate fully? Resign, sign the statement, help with the transition. Can I at least keep my name attached to the brand in some capacity? No. Martin, you named every dish after yourself. You accepted awards for innovation you didn't create. You looked me in the eye at family dinners and told me how proud you were of what you'd built, knowing every word was a lie. I kept my voice level. You don't get to keep your name on my work. Victor looked at Rachel. She was crying silently, mascara running. Sign it, she whispered to him. Just sign it. Rachel, my sister is $80,000 in debt because of this. My father hasn't slept in months. My mother is falling apart. Sign the papers, Victor. It's over. He signed. Every page, every clause, every admission. When he finished, he stood and looked at me with something complicated in his eyes. Not hatred. Something closer to relief. For what it's worth, he said, I did put real work into those dishes. I know the foundation was yours, but I built on it. You built on stolen ground. That's not building. That's squatting. He left without another word. Rachel followed him, pausing at the door. Are you happy now, Dad? No. Then why? Because right is right. Even when it costs you everything. She left. Diana stood slowly. I'm moving out this week, she said. I'll have my attorney contact yours about separation terms. Diana. 24 years, Martin. 24 years. And you chose a con man's approval over our family. I chose to feel alive again. You weren't the only one who lost something when you retired. I lost recipes. You lost integrity. Those aren't the same thing. She left quietly. No argument, no tears. Just the click of heels on hardwood and the soft close of a door. That night I sat in the dark kitchen, the one where I'd developed every recipe that built my career and accidentally destroyed my marriage. I could still smell garlic and thyme in the walls. 20 years of cooking leaves a scent that never fully fades. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. You did the right thing, Dad. Give it time. Then one from Chloe. Thank you for the equity transfer. I can breathe again. Nothing from Rachel. I didn't expect there would be. Not yet. 3 months later, Ember was running better than it ever had. I'd brought in a new head chef, a young woman named Adriana Santos who had her own vision instead of someone else's stolen one. I restructured the menu to honor the techniques properly while evolving them forward. Revenue was up 18%. Investors were thrilled. Rachel came around slowly. She and Victor separated 2 months after the transfer. She told me over coffee that she'd found things on his computer. Conversations with other restaurateurs. He'd been shopping my techniques to potential partners in New York and Miami, planning to franchise the stolen methodology nationwide. She couldn't forgive that. Neither could I, but I didn't say so. Chloe graduated on time, debt-free. She started working at Ember's marketing department, bringing the same energy Rachel once had but with open eyes this time. Nathan flew home for Christmas. We sat in the kitchen, the 4 of us, cooking together for the first time in years. No Diana. She'd moved to Portland with her sister. We exchanged polite emails about logistics. Nothing more. I was plating dessert when my phone rang. Unknown number, Boston area code. Mr. Calloway? My name is James Whitfield. I'm a culinary instructor at Boston University. I'm calling because one of my students submitted a thesis on American catering innovation, and your name features prominently. I'm retired. That's actually why I'm calling. The student, his name is Ethan Brennan. He's 26, incredibly talented, and he's been studying your early Calloway & Co. methodology for 2 years. He has a theory that your original sauce formulations were based on a French-Vietnamese fusion technique that nobody else was doing in the 90s. He's right. I learned it from a woman in Ho Chi Minh City when I was 23. She ran a street stall near Binh Thon Market. He said you'd say that. James paused. Mr. Calloway, Ethan would like to meet you. He's actually your son. The room tilted. Excuse me? I'm sorry. I assumed you knew. Ethan's mother was Linda Brennan. He says you knew her before your marriage. Linda. The name hit me like cold water. Linda Brennan. We'd met in Vietnam when I was traveling through Southeast Asia learning cooking techniques. A brief, intense relationship. She was a journalist. I was a 23-year-old chasing flavors across a continent. We parted ways when I came back to Chicago. Mr. Calloway? I'm here. Ethan's known about you for years. His mother told him before she passed away. Pancreatic cancer, 3 years ago. He's not looking for money or recognition. He just wants to meet the man whose work he's dedicated his academic career to studying. I looked across the kitchen at Nathan, Chloe, and Rachel, who were watching me with curious expressions. Give him my number, I said. I called Ethan that evening. His voice was steady, measured, with an accent that split the difference between Boston and somewhere warmer. I wasn't sure you'd call, he said. I wasn't sure you existed until an hour ago. He laughed, short and surprised. Fair enough. Mom kept it quiet. She said you had your own life and she didn't want to complicate it. She should have told me. Maybe. But she did what she thought was right. He paused. I'm not looking for a dad, Mr. Calloway. I'm 26. I raised myself with Mom's help and a lot of library books. But I've spent 2 years studying your work, and I think your original fusion techniques could revolutionize how we think about American cuisine. That's quite a thesis statement. It's quite a body of work. Another pause. I'd like to come to Chicago, see where it all started. Maybe cook together if you're willing. I'm willing. He arrived 2 weeks later. Tall, with Linda's dark eyes, and, I noticed immediately, my hands. The same broad palms and long fingers that had shaped a million plates. We stood in Ember's kitchen after hours, just the two of us, and I taught him the sauce that started everything. The one Diana stole. The one Victor claimed. The one Paul the Sommelier recognized at the grand opening. Ethan tasted it, closed his eyes, and nodded. That's it. That's the flavor profile I've been trying to reverse engineer for 2 years. You could have just asked. I didn't know you'd answer. We cooked together until 3 in the morning. He told me about Linda, about growing up in Boston, about discovering food as a language that connected him to a father he'd never met. I told him about Calloway & Co., about building something from nothing, about how the best dishes come from the worst mistakes. He met his half-siblings at Easter. Nathan was welcoming. Chloe was cautious. Rachel was wary but kind. They cooked together in my kitchen, 4 young people who shared my blood, figuring out how to be family without a manual. Standing in the doorway watching them argue about seasoning, I realized something. A year ago, I dropped no badge, revealed no secret at a party. What I did was simpler and harder. I opened my eyes to what had been stolen from me, and then I chose to take it back without burning everything down. I lost my marriage. I nearly lost my daughter. I found a son I never knew existed. And somehow, in a kitchen that smelled like garlic and thyme and 20 years of work, I ended up with a family that looked nothing like the one I'd planned but tasted more honest than anything I'd ever made. Some recipes take 20 years to perfect. Some take a lifetime to discover. And the best ones, the ones that really matter, are the ones you never saw coming.